Welcome to the Gold Standard, brought to you by the 440 Sports Network and lowerbroadhockey.com. My name is Braden Gall, and you can get to me on the artist formerly known as Twitter at Braden Gall.
And I'm Emma Lingan, and you can get to me at Emma_Lingan.
And I'm Michael Gallagher. You can get to me at MGSports_.
Yes, I got the introductions right this time.
I was allowed to speak. Thank you.
I did it correctly. All right. So obviously we are brought to you by Sinkers Beverages and Shotgun Willie's Barbecue. Make sure you let Shotgun Willie's Barbecue and Sinkers Beverages handle your Thanksgiving for you. Let them remove the stress. You can go to shotgunwilliesbarbecue.com and order your Thanksgiving meal today. You can pick it up on Wednesday. Swing by Sinkers Beverages and they will deliver pairings. I don't even know what you're supposed to pair with brisket on Thanksgiving, but Sinkers does. That's why they win awards. So you go let them do that. Lots of stuff to get to today. I think judging by basically everything, Predators fans are in a bad place right now. And I understand. I think the team is in a bad place. I think the players are in a dark place. And it's tough to figure out what the answers are with the line changes and the combinations. We do have some interesting messages from the head coach, Andrew Brunette, and the general manager, Barry Trotz. We'll play those for you, and we'll kind of react, and we'll discuss at what point, and I know, Emma, you talked a little bbit about this with Jeremy K. Gover on It's All Your Fault from the Scene in the Post. Go check that out every single Monday normally. I know you guys came out, I think, a little bit later this week. That the game on Monday night against the Kings, 3-0, very indicative of all the problems that this team is having. So we'll get into, when do we believe that the team has actually become the thing that they are? Does that make sense? They're last place in the standings. Do either of you think that they're the last place, the worst team in the Central Division right now, or at the end of the year?
No.
I mean, last time I checked, Chicago is still a thing. So
yeah, so they are not the worst team in the Central Division. The question is, when do you become your record, and that there are no more excuses? And I want to know about that. So we'll get into all that stuff today on the show. All right, so. Sinkers Beverages and Shotgun Willie's Barbecue. Please rate, review, subscribe if you're on the podcast app. If you are watching on YouTube and you want to jump into the comment section, please do so. You can do it that way. You can get involved and, of course, share, turn on notifications, thumbs up on the YouTube page, share it on Twitter and Facebook as well to get you guys involved. And, of course, lowerbroadhockey.com for coverage of your Nashville Predators. All right. I guess I'll start with the Brunette audio because I want to talk about the game against the Kings. And then we could talk about the week that was, the week coming up, and Barry Trotz's threats to the team. But let's start with Andrew Brunette. This was after the game on Monday night, a 3-0 loss to the Los Angeles Kings following a win on Saturday against Colorado and, of course, a loss to Edmonton without Connor McDavid. A lifeless showing in two of those games by the Nashville Predators. Here was Andrew Brunette after the game on Monday's loss to the Kings.
Yeah, we've sensed it for a while, and we just can't seem to correct it and get over it. I think I've talked about it enough here over the last couple of weeks about how it's a dangerous emotion and it's getting the best of us, and it's kind of unfortunately leaked through almost the whole team. And frustration plays tricks on you. Frustration makes you think you're actually working when you're not working. Frustration actually makes you a poor teammate. Frustration is contagious. So those are some pretty bad things, and that's kind of leaked through our group right now.
All right. Pretty frustrated. I think Emma, you and I were there a couple of weeks ago when you said frustration is a scary emotion. And it's sort of like the beginning of acknowledging that frustration is a very real thing. And I said this on the message board, or I guess the chat room on Lower Broad Hockey. I would prefer a coach who is honest, who tells it like it is, over a coach who's a robot, has no emotion, and never tells us anything. I know that sometimes coaches who do that, who are honest, occasionally they take some heat for being honest. I think this is a guy who's also frustrated. If you watch the game, I can't imagine any other emotion for fans on Monday night. But I guess there's two different things here. What do you make of his strategy to talk about it? What do you make of his communication style? And then what do you think it means inside the locker room?
I mean, I think it's a good thing, first of all, that he's saying the thing. He's saying the quiet part out loud, because it would be so much worse if he tried to gloss over it or be like, yeah, no, it happens. We'll get through it. But I mean, very clearly, I think it was very insightful. And I think I really I really, what caught my attention was the part that he said about frustration tricks you into thinking you're working when you're not, because frustration is a very mentally exhausting emotion. And I
Heard.
I think that I've made this comparison before to kind of your mind playing tricks on you, but I know, one of the trainers that I have at the gym has explained the importance of doing a cool down after a workout, and it's not just to relax or stretch or whatever. It's because if you've been doing intense cardio, your body doesn't know any different. Your body is in fight or flight mode. So your body doesn't know if you're being chased by a bear or you're just running on a treadmill. There's no difference. And so that's kind of how I feel about this team right now, is they're frustrated and they're angry, and that tricks them into thinking that they're working harder than they actually are, because they've spent so much mental energy on this. And so yeah, I think it's a good thing. I think it's good that he put it out there and said it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's refreshing to have a head coach and a general manager be so transparent, because the last few years we were with John Hines and Peter Laviolette and David Poyle, and they didn't like to tip their hand. They like to play everything close to the vest, and we would ask them, John Hines, for example, is frustration creeping in? And then he would give I don't know if it's frustration. It's more this, more that. And he would kind of steer it away and give us the coach speak answer. Now, Andrew Brunette's not afraid to go head on with the problem. Be like, yeah, we're frustrated and it's creeping into X, Y, and Z. And we can tell by the way we're playing, and we can tell by this and that frustration's a real thing. And I think it's good that they're able to put a label on it, and they're able to be like, this is one of the issues we're struggling with, because now it's something that they can go and they can identify and they can work on. And it's baffling that a team this talented with as many good players as they have is dealing with something as rudimentary as being frustrated because you're not winning games.
I also think it's frustrating too that because Brunette was honest, I've seen, as much as I've tried to stay away from the cesspool that is Twitter over the last few days, I have seen a lot of takes from people saying that Brunette's soft and he's the problem and he's not hard enough on these players. Let me tell you, if you would have seen any of the Predators' practices in the last week, he was anything but soft. And I don't think having an emotion makes you soft. And I think it actually is a sign of strength that we're willing to identify, here's the problem, and we know what we need to fix.
It's kind of hard to play one of the most difficult, notoriously difficult league-wide systems in the NHL and be a soft coach. Those two just don't add up.
Yep. Being in touch with your emotions is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign of strength. It is a sign of, I would argue, positive masculinity, just while we're talking about it. Eddie says, Preds are the Jets of the NHL, aging talent, loaded, dysfunctional roster. I don't think they're a dysfunctional roster. I don't necessarily agree with that. It is aging talent. There's no question about that. Yeah, Ben, good to see you, Ben. Emotions are good. Go to therapy. Look, I agree. It's just the thing. But Emma, you were there. The players are just as frustrated, just as pissed off. Luke Shen and O'Reilly basically said it was the worst game he's ever played. Of course they are frustrated, and I don't think it's weird or soft to point that out and to call. Now, is it Andrew Brunette's job to figure out how to send a new and fresh message to them so that it lands? That's part of the complicated aspect of coaching. But addressing the thing after a game in which everyone is pissed off. I mean, look, that was the worst game of the season, right? Is that fair? I mean, you're at home. You're coming off a win over Colorado. You think you might have some ideas on how the line might look. Juuso Parsonen's in there as the second center. And you largely create no offense the entire game. You have the fewest shots that you've had all season. 16 is a period for Andrew Brunette's teams. The most penalty minutes they've taken in a game. And, lost 3-0 in a shutout at home. It's the worst one.
It's sad when the highlight of the game for your team is Luke Shen kicking Tanner Jeannot's ass. That's sad. He
was pissed that he lost that last fight.
But also kudos to Luke Shen, because Tanner Jeannot doesn't lose a lot of fights, and Luke Shen got his ass kicked the last time he was in a fight. So I mean, that was fun to watch.
Yeah, I agree. So does that? I guess there's no question in there, but I just think that I mean, again, I don't know what you picked up on all that stuff, right? Were you in the locker room afterward, Emma? You were there, right?
Oh, I was, yeah. And it definitely was, if I would agree, maybe if you were uncertain as to whether that was the worst game of the season, you would no longer be uncertain after being in that locker room. You would know for sure. At least the players felt that it was the worst game of the season because, again, I know we kind of make fun of O'Reilly because after a loss, he tends to blame himself for a lot of things that are not his fault. But in this case, the fact that he said, I was pathetic. That was probably one of the worst games I played in my entire career. And I think that that's kind of what it is like, it's frustration. And these guys aren't frustrated. It's not like again, when I agree with you that it's not a dysfunctional roster because these guys aren't frustrated with each other. I think they're frustrated more with themselves, and they can't get working as a 5-man unit when you're all too in your own head and too, frustrated with your own play. And if you can't trust yourself, you can't trust each other, you can't trust the system, and it's all just kind of snowballing. And I don't pretend to have the answer and like, oh, this is what you need to do to get rid of that or to reset it. But I do believe that they will. Like, I really do believe that they will, because I think Gover was the one who said it on It's All Your Fault. And he said, this team is too good to be this bad. Like, it's too good on paper. And I know we say on paper, fantasy hockey, whatever, but I think that they will figure it out. And I'm not saying they'll have it figured out by next week. Probably won't be as, quick as anyone would like, but I really do. I think they'll get over this, but that does not change the fact that it is bad right now. I'm not at all trying to say like, guys, it's not that bad, because it is. It's bad, but it's, I think they will find a way.
Yeah, I think something else to keep in mind too is, I mean, I know it's hard when you're a Preds fan and you see the team playing like they are, and it's bad. It looks bad. The results are bad. No one's happy. 12 games into an 82 game season. Perspective. There's a lot of hockey left to play. And if you look at what this team was doing last year around the same mark, they're 4-7-1 this year. Last year they were 5-7. I mean,
they were 5-10 last year.
Yeah, I mean, things progressively got worse. So it was worse last year going into to the same point of the season. But we're 12 games into the season, and look, you get a couple bounces. I mean, the Dallas game, they could have easily won that game. You look at the Tampa Bay game, you lose in overtime, they could have easily won that game. They're a minute or 2 minutes away from being 6-5 and being an above 500 team. Like, I know it's easy to overreact and freak out, but you're 12 games into the season, and I'm hesitant to make this comparison because I know everyone's gonna be like, oh, it's not the same. But they got their asses kicked last year by Dallas 9-2, and then Andrew Brunette. I know there was a whole U2 thing, all that stuff. Andrew Brunette showed he knows how to make adjustments when there's adversity. I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt because he's done it before. When things suck and no one has the answer, he has shown that he has the capability to get more out of his players. So I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt that he'll be able to do that and salvage this season, because again, we're 12 games into the year.
Yeah, and ultimately we're going to kind of make some not predictions, but sort of like our own personal, hey, this is when I think it's like permanently you've become what you are. Like, you are what your record says you are at the end of the year. You are not what your record says you are after 12 games. And so, but I also think it's important on this lovely Wednesday morning to allow space to vent when you are frustrated and upset about things. And I think the optics of the third period against the Kings are just they're worse than a bad game, because it's you give up a goal right away where it's a mistake at the blue line and it's a 2-on-1 and the former Nashville Predator scores the goal, Kevin Fiala. And then you get 3 shots the entire period. Like, it's just it's the optics of how the third period also played out at home following a bad start. You put it all together and people are very upset. Now, I think lowerbroadhockey.com is great. I love it. I'm excited about it. I think it's great that you guys are a part of the community. But that chat room is also a place to vent. And sometimes you just got to vent. Firing Andrew Brunette is not on the table, guys. It's not. All the things that we are going to talk about today about when we think it's okay to start talking about that stuff is way down the road. That does not minimize your current feelings as a fan of frustration and being pissed off, and it's okay to be pissed off and to vent about it. It's okay. That's
firing Barry Trotz isn't on the table either. So
no,
that out there.
No, it's not. I think one of the folks, I'm not going to use the names for all the negative comments in the chat room, but somebody was like, I think we need the governor, Bill Haslam, to clean house. I'm like, okay, let's settle down. let's settle down.
Bill Haslam's not going to be that kind of owner. The Predators never are going to go with someone who's that kind of owner.
So let's see here. More to explore says sometimes you have to hit rock bottom before you rise. There's the inspiration there. At least it's now and not in April. So I tend to agree. Again, I just think that it was Jeff, I think, in the chat room that said they are among the worst teams in the NHL. Now, on paper, they are last. They are last place in the Central. They have 9 points. That is the worst in the NHL, point total wise. Does anyone believe that this is the worst team in the NHL? In my opinion, the answer is very clearly no. In their last 7 games, and I know you can do this in hockey where you can just like pick which number of games you want and like pick out whatever stats you want, but they're 4-2-1. They have killed 22 out of 23 penalties. They have the best penalty kill in the NHL, basically, I think by half a point. Maybe the Rangers are better now. They are 6 of 22 on the power play, which is excellent in that stretch as well. And they were 5-10 last year. So I don't think even the most upset fan right now has to acknowledge that they are not the worst team in the NHL. They're just not. And if they finish that way at the end of the year, then that's what they'll be. But we're 12 games in. And again, as you pointed out, Michael, they were 5-10 last year. They were worse last year to start the season. Now, in a perfect world, if Andrew Brunette's going to be here a long time, you don't want these starts to the season to continue. But it's year 2. You brought in some new pieces. Let's give it a little bit of time. And I know folks hearing the words patience is frustrating for fans right now because they're pissed off, and that's okay. You know who else is pissed off, guys? Barry Trotz. Now, you're going to have to look at Stillman's face if you are watching on YouTube or Twitter for this clip. But
just close your eyes and listen. It'll be all right.
But on the podcast app, you're good to go. But it was Barry Trotz with Stillman on Stillman and Company, and I believe this was Tuesday, correct? Following the loss on Monday night. But got to credit the source here, and it was on 102.5 The Game. So make sure we do that. You're gonna have to look at Stillman. But here's what Barry Trotz had to say on Tuesday about pivoting to a rebuild.
We get on the road here a little bit. I'm trying to do some things right now. We will be limited a little bit because of some of the contracts that we do have. If we don't get it going, then I'm going to start our rebuild plan a little bit. What we did in the summer was, as I say, fantasy hockey until we become a good team. If we do not become a good team, then we're going to see a lot more of our kids starting their process. Like I said, we brought in the veteran players to extend this year and be a threat. I think I use the term. And then hopefully in the next coming years, our young guys come in and they take a bigger role. So if we fall out into a position where we fall out and it's not happening or it doesn't come together, then, I'm going to start probably that process, and you're going to see some kids and we'll start our process on getting them the needed games that they need and start developing them and still trying to win because we've got some good players. But we're gonna shake it up if we don't get going pretty soon, for sure.
All right, so I've got some questions about what he could possibly mean with some of the specific things he said, but I want to start with number one, and that is this not just an old-fashioned like coach/GM messaging through the media to his players? Because this is what Nick Saban does. Nick Saban has done this his entire career. When he gets frustrated to the point of like nothing's working, he goes to the press and he basically takes it out on the press with the message for his players through the media. Football coaches do this all the time. I think coaches in any sport do this. General managers don't always do it, but Barry Trotz is a coach by nature. I think using the word rebuild, I think he knew was going to make Stillman's face like twitch, and it did. So I'm not sure I'm buying any of the rebuild stuff or the conversation. To me, that's a message for the team, right? Thoughts?
I think most likely yes, but I think really what's more important here, in my opinion, is to focus on what it's not. And what it's not is him saying, we're going to rebuild now. We're in panic mode now. and everything's terrible and we're going to start tearing it down. I've made a huge mistake. We're going to just rip everything into shreds. And I think based on some of the reactions I've seen, people are seeing it that way. They're interpreting it that way. And it's like, oh my God, Barry Trotz is realizing it's, he made a big mistake and now he's already talking about a rebuild. Okay, that's the responsible thing to do in his position. If he went on there and said, no, we're not concerned, everything's going to be fine, like I don't see any problem with the way the team is playing right now, then that would get an even bigger reaction. Like, of course he has to, that's his way of acknowledging, yes, this is not good. And if this continues into the distant future, then we will start to have that conversation. But I mean, he didn't say this, but that's how I took it, is like, we're not panicking right now. But if this continues, yes, of course, I'm thinking ahead, because that is my job as the GM, to plan for the now and for the future.
Yeah, I agree. What Barry did was like grade A psychological manipulation there. He sandwiched it by saying, we're bad. I'm trying to do some things, which is letting fans know I'm trying to acquire some players to help because the players we have aren't producing. So we need to bring in new players that are going to produce. And then he threw out the rebuild and he was like, look, things are bad. And if it doesn't get better, like, I'm not going to be hesitant to call up some of the young guys and get the rebuild. And then he sandwiched it by putting in there, once we start to fall out. No one has fallen out of the playoff race 12 games into the season, unless you're the Blackhawks. And technically they're ahead of the Predators in the standings. So I guess you can't really make that argument. But again, I'm keying in on that. I know everyone's keying in on the rebuild part, but I'm keying in on when he said, once we start to fall out, because we're probably going to talk about this in a little bit, but that could be January, that could be February, that could be the trade deadline. I mean, there's general managers still making deals at the trade deadline that are trying to improve their playoff odds. So there's so many moving parts to this. I think he threw the rebuild word out there, and he mentioned bringing up some of the young guys as kind of like a wake-up call to some of the veterans. Because, I mean, look, you can't start a rebuild when half of your roster has a no-trade clause. It's just not going to happen. You can't do a rebuild with that. He signed these guys to big contracts. And I tweeted it. I was joking because I knew it would get a rise out of most people. But I was like, he spent $108.5 million on 3 players. They're all locked into 3-4 year deals. You have so many players that are good. You're not going to start a rebuild with the roster you have. You have too many good players to blow it all up, especially when you just signed a third of them to big money deals over the summer.
I think the rebuild word was used on purpose to be a message to folks. I don't think there's any conceivable logical path for the Nashville Predators to do a rebuild. Maybe in the offseason at the end of the year, but there's just no way to do it. Like, you're not waiving players, you're not cutting players, you're not buying them out. You're like, if the team is out of it near the trade deadline, do you cut your losses and maybe see if somebody wants to take one of the deals or one of the players wants to get moved? That's just doing your diligence as a general manager at that point. Josh says, I think this is what I agree with here as well with Josh, which he says, I think Trotz is a pretty open GM, which he always has been, even as a coach. What he's saying would be the thought process of most GMs try to win, but lay out the other options on the table. I think that's also part of this. Is he just is an honest, open communicator. He always has been. Talks too much for a general manager / head coach. But I think it's clearly a message to the team saying, look, if y'all don't fix some of this stuff, we're going to have to pursue other options, which is the job. And right now, it's very clear that the players communicating with each other or with themselves, or the coach's message to the players, or the general manager's message to the coach, etc., like it's not working. People are upset and frustrated. So you got to try some new stuff. And I think sending a message through the media is absolutely something that coaches have done in the past and general managers have done in the past. It's very common.
This reminds me of a couple of years ago when they fired Peter Laviolette, when David Poile came out and he was like, you can't fire 20 players, so I had to fire the head coach. To me, this is the reverse. This is him saying, Andrew Brunette's not the problem, it's the players. And if the players don't start producing, I'm going to start replacing some of them. That's what this felt like.
I agree. And Ben brings up the 2019 Blues. Is that when they were in last place in January, fired their coach, had a rookie goaltender, and then won a Stanley Cup? That is not a traditional path to success that is sustainable. That is the anomaly. That's the outlier. It's sort of like the Preds being the last team in and making it to the Cup final. That is not the way to do it.
But it is also proof that it can be done. It's also proof it can be done.
Of course. But it can be done very rarely. It's not the way to do it. It just can happen. So here's my question to you guys. What does, quote, trying to do some things right now mean to you guys? What does that mean?
To me, it means he's putting feelers out and trying to make calls about getting a center, but also understanding that no one is trading right now. But yeah, that's kind of how I took it.
Yeah, to me, that says I'm looking for a number 2 center, and I also wouldn't be surprised if he's looking for another defenseman.
Those answers were much shorter than I expected.
I can elaborate. Tommy Novak isn't a number 2 center, and the defense right now sucks. Everyone aside from Roman Josi is failing at their job. Well, that's a little harsh on Mark Del Gaizo because he's actually playing pretty well. Everybody except for Roman Josi and Mark Del Gaizo is failing at their job. And it's tough because Carrier and Lozon have been so good on the penalty kill, but they're not as strong 5-on-5. The whole team is terrible 5-on-5, and the numbers show it. I can read them off if you want to hear how bad they are. But
sure, let's do it.
You want me to?
Why not?
I got them right here. You want them?
Yeah, no, go for it. The expected goals on Monday was 4.1 for the Kings, 1.79 for the Preds. High danger scoring chances 19-8.
So 5-on-5. They have allowed the 6th most goals 5-on-5. They have the worst goal differential in the NHL 5-on-5, -18. They have the lowest shooting percentage 5-on-5, which is around 4.5%. They have the 2nd worst goals for above expected, the 3rd highest goals above average expected, the 4th lowest save percentage, and the lowest PDO. If you don't know what PDO is, basically it's a sum of the team's shooting percentage and save percentage, and it measures like how lucky the team is. The average is 100. They're at 92.8. So 5-on-5, they are a mess. That's what really needs to be addressed. But to my point, the defense hasn't been great. Brady Shea has had moments where he's looked good and moments where you're like, oh, that was bad. We all agree Luke Shen needs to be benched. Dante Fabro is in and out. Mark Del Gaizo's been pretty steady. But, I mean, they need some sort of stability because the goaltending hasn't been great, but it hasn't been the entire issue. I think the big problem is the defense in front of UC Saros has been very shaky. And when you're a goaltender, you don't know what's coming at you or what you expect. That affects you.
And I think when we talk about defense, team defense, we're not just, at least from my perspective, not just talking about the defenseman. I'm talking about, the defensive play by the forwards as well has been bad. Forwards have been bad in the defensive end. And I think it's it's not one problem. It's not, the defense is bad or the offense is bad or whatever. It's everything. As a 5-man unit, they are not clicking. That's the problem. And that makes it harder because it's like this big scary monster that we don't know what to do with, because it's harder. If you look at a team like Colorado, for example, had a rough start to the season as well. Much easier to pinpoint what their problem is. It's like their goaltending sucks and they have a lot of players who are out with injuries or suspensions or whatever it is. But they almost have a timeline where it's like, okay, by December or by wherever, like they should be better. And with this team, with the Predators, that's what makes this so frustrating, is because it isn't just one thing and it isn't just one area. It's like the entire unit is not clicking. And the one that's really been mind-boggling to me, and Mike mentioned it, is the Lozon-Carrier pairing. They've been so good on the penalty kill, so good. And then at 5-on-5, it's like they forget how to play. Like, I don't understand it. I think I'm willing to give more patience and more benefit of the doubt to Brady Shea because he is new to this system. And I think that, like you said, there's been moments where he's been really, really solid, and then others where it looks like he, got completely caught off guard. I'm willing to be more patient with him because he's coming from a Carolina system that played much more like extremely different kind of defense. And so, yes, he hasn't been great, but I don't think he's the problem. I think it's just the unit as a whole. And unfortunately, I know fans don't want to hear it and they're frustrated, and rightfully so, but I think the only thing that is going to fix this, like this big, like looming problem that we're talking about, is time. You need to give these guys more time. I know it feels like it's been a long time, but to Mike's point, it's 12 games in an 82 game season. It sucks right now, but it still hasn't been a lot of time.
And like Emma said, the two-way play of the forwards really has a lot to do with it. They have 8 players on this team with 10 or more giveaways. 5 of them are forwards.
Yeah. Look, so I think that's enough negativity. I think we can kind of, because I think we've already gotten out to the patience time. You got more to explore in the comments saying chemistry, patience, and luck. None are clicking. All will improve the situation. I tend to agree with that. And Frank on Lower Broad Hockey said this team is in desperate need of a road trip, and that's where they are this week for a couple of games. Then they're back at home on Saturday against Utah, I believe, and then I think it's the Western Canadian swing.
Trip.
So yeah,
Yep.
so that trip will be okay. Let's talk about our two amazing, wonderful local sponsors here before we get to the main question, which is when is the right time? Because Trotz says, I'm going to shake it up if we don't get going for sure. We all are okay with that. The question is when. When is the right time to do all of that and to punt and to give up on what they were trying to do all summer, which is not 12 games. We all agree. That being said, let's do some positivity here before we get to the patience and the questions about the team. And that is, you might need a drink today because the Preds are bad, is what I'm saying. You might need a drink today. So if you do, make sure you go to Sinker's Beverages in East Nashville, 4-time liquor store of the year in Tennessee, as voted on, Middle Tennessee, as voted on by you, the users of that fine establishment. They've been serving the community for almost 40 years, and you can search Uber Eats and have them deliver that booze directly to your house. I am not a wine person. I think Michael's a big Pinot Noir guy, I think. Isn't that right, Mike? Big Pinot guy.
I don't drink at all, so I'm the worst person to ask about this stuff.
They got a great bourbon selection, incredible allocations, and they've got all kinds of other stuff, non-alcoholic stuff. They got tons of THC drinks in there, and other THC products that you can get. Liquor stores are apparently the only place you can buy that stuff.
Now you're speaking my language. I'd be interested in that.
It's very, very good. My wife is big. She doesn't drink that much anymore at all, but she loves the THC beverages. They got gummies in there too. And if you need you probably might need to chill out a little bit. I think it's a perfect mechanism for you there. And if you like to cope and manage with your stress in other ways, like eating, which is also very common, Shotgun Willie's Barbecue, folks. They got the best brisket. They're open on Wednesday through Sunday, starting today, of course, 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. or until the meat is gone, because those are the best kind of barbecue joints, not the ones that keep all the meat around at night for the night crowd, the ones that sell it until it's gone. They cook the meat every day. It's fresh. Shotgun Willie's Barbecue, best Texas brisket in the city, full stop there, and also award-winning, as voted on by the Writer's Choice for the Nashville scene. They got the best barbecue in the city by the Nashville scene. I think Steve Cavendish wrote that one. And with all due respect to a lot of people in the city that write about food, Cav knows his food. The guy likes to eat.
He goes on these epic rants on Twitter calling out the Tennessean anytime they have a food critique that is just even a touch off base. So Steve Cavendish is the one person in the city I would trust with a food review. Yeah,
not many people know more about the food in the city than Steve Cavendish, but he did the write-up for Shotgun Willie's Barbecue. So, and of course you can order your Thanksgiving meal from Shotgun Willie's Barbecue and get your wine paired by Sinker's Beverages. Look at that cohesion. There's more chemistry in my ad reads than there are in the Nashville Predators right now. So, okay. The question is, when does the team sort of become who they are? And I think it is hard to, and again, I'm not trying to call out Jeff here, but he said it on the chat room, which is they are among the worst teams in the NHL. And I think it's hard to make a case that this is one of the worst teams in the NHL based on talent, based on history, based on last season, based on even currently the fact that they have the second best penalty kill in the league, a top 12 power play. And you cannot argue, as Adam and I did on Monday's show, that this is potentially the best special teams in the same season that the Predators have ever had in franchise history. It's hard to say those things and then turn around and say it's one of the worst teams in the NHL. One of the worst, that last place in the Central is what they are. That last fewest points in the league is what they are. Again, 5-10 last year. So the question is, when do you guys start to say, all right, the record is who they are? And they do need to start having conversations about working through the roster and making changes and making moves and taking phone calls for players that we didn't expect. When does that happen for you two personally?
I don't think for me, I don't think there's a specific time by December, by January. Because you look at last year, right after Valentine's Day, they had that bad loss to Dallas. They were 2 games above 500, and then they went on that crazy run, 18-game point streak. And I get that's more of an anomaly than it is that should be expected. but that was mid-February. So even as late into the season as that, it's hard to write off a team. I think for me, I would be worried once they fall, I would say 5 games or more below 500. Once the record starts getting out of hand and the other teams are winning and you're not closing that gap, that's when I worry. But as long as they still have a 500 record or a little bit better, I still won't count them out because they have Steven Stamkos and Marchessault and Forsberg, and I'm not discounting Barry Trotz making a big trade at the deadline if they're right there, if they're still in it. They're a few games out. I'm not discounting him going out and ponying up what it's going to cost to go get a big name forward, a big name center like that. But I think for me, it's more of their record and not really a specific point in the season, because as long as their record says that they're in it, I still think that they're in it.
I totally agree. I think that I've gotten this question too from fans, is like, at what point in the season? And really, I don't think it has to do with a certain point in the season. Again, I bring up last year. It's like, this was not a playoff team until like late February, and they still, they made it happen. And so I don't think that there's a certain point in the season that you can really pinpoint as like, oh, this is the point of no return. I think, like Mike said, it has to do with how the team is performing. And again, I still, you can't count this team out after what we saw. Again, I keep harping on this with Andrew Brunette is not the problem. Last year, he was a Jack Adams finalist. Everyone in Nashville wanted to, erect a statue of the guy, and now they want him fired. And it's like, no, you can't count this team out. I'm not saying it's been good or it's been, all sunshine and roses the whole time, but I think that like Mike said before, we have to give him the faith that he has earned based on last year's performance, that they will be able to right the ship and turn this around. It just may not happen on the timeline that we're all hoping for.
Yeah, I agree with that. More to explore on a heater here in the comment section. I think Emma is saying, if you fall, I will catch you. I will be waiting. Time after time. Is that Cyndi Lauper? Is that what that is? Music lyrics there. We have the meats. And he says the Preds aren't cooked until the turkey is. No, I think that's close, though, to one of the first benchmarks, because here's what I was going to say. They're 4-2-1 in their last 7. If they do that 2 more times, you go 4-2-1, 8-4-2 over your next 14 games, you will be 12-11-3, which puts you above 500. So in theory, if you do what you just did over the last 7 games 2 more times, you'll be above 500. I do think that there's a little bit more urgency with this team than just like what you guys are saying about February and March and the trade deadline and being like, well, they weren't a playoff team. Like this, the expectations were higher. So it's okay to say this team needs to get into the playoff ranks and into the top of the division faster than that, because they have higher expectations for this team because they spent a bunch of stuff on this team. But I agree. It's not till the deadline, or at least a few weeks out from the deadline, until you have to make ultimate decisions about where the roster is going. And if you think you can move one of these guys, I don't think you want to move Shea at all. But if somebody calls you about Stamkos or Marchessault and wants to take him and the player's okay with it, and you're out of the playoffs, then you can start to talk about some of these moves that Barry Trotz is talking about. Or I would say sort of he's not falsely alluding to them. He's just like, hey guys, I'm going to do this if y'all don't straighten your shit out.
Yeah, I think what you just said is kind of the trade deadline is like the hard period of the season when we know one way or another what this team is. If they're still in it, there's still a chance Trotz is going to go for broke and he's going to add some pieces. If they're out of it and he realistically does not think that they have any chance of even sneaking into the playoffs, he's going to start selling off some pieces. And we were in the same boat last year. We were debating, okay, when does Barry start selling off pieces? Because heading into the trade deadline last year, 2 weeks before, we were like, start it now, get rid of all these pieces, bring on the rebuild, get all the young guys up. And then they went on that heater. And then next thing you know, it's like within the span of a week, they went from Barry Trotz having a fire sale to Barry Trotz on the prowl looking for someone to add to the roster. So, I mean, it can change very quickly.
Barry Trotz on the prowl. That's a visual. Just like him walking around Bridgestone like,
He and Nash are out there just going on a hunt.
I like it. Jamie says, all things considered, I am just glad it's easy to watch the games in this market. Never been so disconnected with the Preds, much like their 5-on-5 hockey, and rely on your coverage to help interpret results. Thank you. Jamie, I'm curious, do you just not have the app, I guess, is what he doesn't have? Another complaint about I guess it's now the FanDuel app, is like the fact that you can't just hold the button down and fast forward through replays. Like that you have to push every single button to get ahead 30 seconds. What are we doing? It is 2024. Better technology. Diamond Sports Group, what are you doing? Yeah, okay. Anyway, sorry.
Well, I feel like Diamond Sports Group has a track record of proving not to be the most reliable either. So if we're banking on them to have an app that works properly, I mean, they can't even have their company not go bankrupt. So
I know. All right. So are you guys believing in the road trip theory? Frank was there. I know, Emma, you talked about it a little bit as well. Jamie says, nope, not doing the app. Did it last year. Was terrible. My choice, but only way I can send a message. True. That's true. Are you guys buying into the? And which player alluded to this? Was it Luke Shen who might have alluded to it?
O'Reilly.
O'Reilly alluded to it, and it's such a weird thing. And I think you and Gover talked about it, where it's like, man, this team is really. It's like it's been a real negative that they've had so many home games. Not a thing you normally hear in sports in general.
But it's so true. It's so true.
If
you've been on the team side of things, which I have, it is so true. And I'm not saying that road trips are great and everything's wonderful about it. And I'm not saying that, as soon as this team gets on the road, everything's going to turn around and it's going to be great and they're going to sweep the whole Western road trip. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, like I talked about before, with frustration and all of the mental energy that it costs to be this frustrated, so much of that just dissipates when you're on the road, because things that you don't even think about as like taking up your mental energy, things like, and again, before anyone comes at me, I'm not saying that having a family is a distraction, and I'm not saying that, but it's
Emma hates your kids, guys.
Yeah. Listen, I'm just saying that I think that there is, whether you realize it or not, everyone as a human being, you are using mental energy on these things, like your spouse, your kids, your commute, your, other responsibilities that you have, just like things
other things happening in the world.
Yeah.
Getting harassed at the grocery store.
Yeah. Like there are things that they're maybe not front of mind because they're just mindless things for you because you do them all the time. And, but they are costing you mental energy. Then you get on the road, you don't have to worry about anything. I'm not saying that, they're just, everything's wonderful. But I think that you go,
your day-to-day life is curated for you.
Yes. And it's like, again, having been on the team side of things, it's so much, everything about game day is simpler when you're on the road, because you don't have to you don't have to worry about getting yourself to the rink. You don't have, like, for me, I don't have to go make sure my dog is fed and walked. I don't have to, worry about traffic getting there. I don't have to do anything else. The whole reason you're there is to play the game. And I think that, or in my case, to cover the game. But I think that is what this team needs, because when they're at home, they're not hanging out. And, I'm not saying that they're not friends or they don't like each other, but it's like they just haven't had as much time together off the ice. And I'm not saying that it's an off ice problem and they don't get along, but I think that will help, kind of get everyone on the right track, because Andrew Brunette said it too. Like, we need to just get simpler. We need to, and to me, that was the first thing I thought, is that everything about game day on the road is simpler, because you're, like you said, Braden, your day-to-day life is curated for you. You don't have to worry about anything. All you have to do is show up at the time that you're supposed to get on the bus, go and play the game. And I think that will help so much with this team and what they're experiencing, and just getting that for a stretch. I don't know that this, 2-day back-to-back is going to do it, but I think just getting some extended time together. Again, I'm not saying they're going to turn it around and go on a heater right away, but I think it's going to do a lot for this team in the long run if they can, kind of get back to the basics and just kind of remember why they're here.
No gasoline fights like in Zoolander, where there's a montage and some music playing, and they're all just dancing around off the ice, just having fun with a gasoline fight with their lattes.
Yeah,
come on, guys,
yeah.
That's a great scene. Come on.
Yeah, no,
I've seen Zoolander.
You've never seen Zoolander?
No.
Oh my gosh. It does look like some of the players are not ambi turners, to be honest. Like they're always the behind the back passes are just like, no, guys, you can go both directions. It's okay. Oh man, you got to you got to watch Zoolander, Mike. It's great.
I'll put it on my to-do list with my abundance of free time. I will say about this before we move topics. I actually talked to Ryan Johansson about this very thing. I think it was in 2018, 2019. And he kind of described it as when things are good, you want to be at home. When things are bad, you want to be on the road. And he said it's because basically for everything Emma just said. And he was like, when you're on the road, like you're not expected to win. So if you lose, who cares? You're in, you're out, you're on to the next one. When you're at home and you're losing, you have to see all the people and kind of you have to own up to your flaws and your mistakes and why you lost when you go grocery shopping, when you're at the gym. Like you see these people, you're in the community with them, and they don't let you live it down. So I do think, and we've seen it time and time again where the Predators have been struggling. Feels like they're at a crossroads in their season. I don't think they're there 12 games into the year, but they've gone on a West Coast road trip or they've gone on a Canadian road trip. They've won 3 of 4, 5 of 6, and they've come back. And all of a sudden, like their confidence is up. The vibe in the room is different. It's not all doom and gloom like it was before they left. So I think that this could have a similar effect on the team as far as morale.
I agree. I just also can't get the visual of Ryan O'Reilly like spraying gasoline on Luke Shen and like dancing to music in the background. You'll understand it when you watch the movie, Michael. Josh says, "What is this? A podcast for ants?" How can we expect them to win hockey games if they can't even fit through the door? Anyway, I know way too many lines from that. That's really stupid, but quite entertaining movie. Look, it's about focus. That's all it is. It allows you to focus more. It allows you to, and frankly, in a system where it's about chemistry, having some chemistry off the ice or in your travel or in other moments at practice, whatever, is going to be helpful. I also this is the other thing that I keep thinking about like the time length of, hey, this is the length of time before it clicks for the system with Brunette, and this is the length of time before we overreact, before we do all this other stuff. What's interesting to me is like coaches react and respond to systems. You put something on tape, they see it, they know how to react better to it. That is going to happen with Andrew Brunette. He played a whole season. They were very, very good for the last, let's say, 2/3 of the season. And coaches are going to study that. They're going to study how to attack Brunette's system. So he does have to evolve. There has to have tweaks and changes. It's not just, here's how we do things. You guys are the 3 or 4 new players. You need to adapt. Let's roll. It's going to take some time. He also has to adapt to some degree because coaches are going to react to that. And the only thing I can think of that actually makes the complaining legitimate from fans and Trotz looking at this, and I think we said this a couple of weeks ago, which is if the rest of the league figured it out and that's now the problem, then we can start talking about more changes. But you'd have to have Barry Trotz in a moment of honesty say, I don't think this system is going to be successful long-term in the NHL. And I don't know why he would have hired the guy if he believed that. So that's the other thing on this is like, if they are really, really bad in at the end of the year and they don't get better and they're behind Utah in the standings, I think we can start to have a conversation about the system needs to change or evolve or something needs to be different. I don't think we could do that until it's official. It's like a finalized thing that we can ask somebody, hey, has the rest of the league figured this out? And if that's the case, we'll know that, but not until the end of the year. So,
and if that is the case, that's almost a bigger problem because if the rest of the league can figure this out, then why can't the players on the roster figure out Andrew Brunette's system? Because clearly it's not jiving out there.
No, I agree. I think it's, again, ultimately, if Brunette's going to be here 10 years, you can't have bad starts to every season. But if it's a part of how this system works, which is it's so predicated on timing and chemistry and understanding and spatial awareness and speed, all this stuff. It might just be something that takes time every year for it to get going. That's all. And that's possible. So I'm just not there yet. I need it to be after January before I start making any sweeping judgments about this stuff. because they're not the last place team. They're just not. It's not who they are. And I know it's hard to hear when you watch Monday's game and you are frustrated as a fan. Like, I get it. It was a tough watch. It was. I assume the players were also had a tough time playing in the game as well. So here's a question. I'm gonna try to lighten the mood. Sinkers, Beverages, and Shotgun Willie's Barbecue. Obviously, you got Washington, you got Florida, you got Utah. Lots to do before we come back together next week. LowerBroadHockey.com, of course. Check out all of our great content there. Mike, you got Stock Report coming. I believe that'll be up tomorrow, so make sure you check that out.
Thursday morning.
So, yeah, depending on when you're listening to this. I have I don't know why I started thinking about this, because one of the things you would do if things aren't going your way and you're trying everything is to sort of break your habits, break your superstitions, break your routines. And Emma, you've been around a lot of the guys. I'm curious, first of all, do either of you two have any bizarre, like, it's not a superstition, but like a habit or a tick that's just kind of strange because you do it like that every time? I'm sure we all have them. I'm just curious if you guys can think of any, because I want to see. I want to know what some of the Predators stuff are. Like, you got so much gear you're taking on and off. Some guys do it exactly the same every time, because it's like habit. I don't think it's superstition as much. But do either of you have anything at all, like in that world?
It's not crazy, but one thing I guess it's a sports superstition is whenever I go boxing, I have to put my right glove on before my left glove every time. I think it started a couple years ago. One time I put my left glove on first and I got my ass kicked in sparring, and that usually doesn't happen. And then every other time I put my right glove on, and I'm like, oh, that was just a one-off fluke. But being in sports, dealing with superstitions now, right glove goes on every time.
That's exactly what I'm talking about. And so if there's one of those for one of these players, do it the other way. Is where I'm at. Emma, you got anything? There's got to be something. Come on.
I mean, not currently, but when I worked for the Carolina Hurricanes and they were in the playoffs, and one game I showed up. This is back when I used to rarely, if ever, curl my hair. I don't enjoy curling my hair. It's a very lengthy process. I don't like it. But one day, there was one game, I think it was the first playoff game, and then I curled my hair and everyone showed up. I showed up, everyone was like, "Oh my gosh, your hair looks so good." I'm like, "Thank you."
It looks terrible every other day we see you.
Exactly. I was like, "Thank you." But then they won, and I don't remember exactly what the game was, but it was like a comeback win. It was like a big comeback in a game they were not expected to win. And then after that, the other people who worked there started calling them the comeback curls. And so I had to start curling my hair for every playoff game until they lost. And they made it to the Eastern Conference final that year. So it was a lot of heat damage on my hair. But
how much, how long does that take each day at that time of your life?
I don't know. It can take, if I'm really, it depends, because bad hair days are a thing. They are a real thing. If I'm having a good hair day, it maybe takes 30 minutes. On a worse day, probably closer to 45. And I do not have that kind of free time in my life. That's why I rarely curl my hair. Yeah, but it was working. It was the comeback curls for that team. Got them to the Eastern Conference final.
So not superstitious, just a little stitious, as Josh says in the comments there. This is a weird one, and I'm not trying to gross anybody out here, but I have to dry off when I get out of the shower with the exact same routine every time. It's very strange. It's like the towel does the exact same thing, and my arms do the exact same thing. It's just very strange. I don't know why I do it. I have no idea. I can't explain it. It just happens. And those it's what makes people humans, frankly. And I just am very curious. It's probably a cheesy cliche story to want to go write about the Nashville Predators, but I want to know every one of their ticks. I want to know what they do. That's very this is how I get ready. To your point, Michael, I put the right glove on first. Do you always have to untie your right skate first? I'm just curious. It's not even superstition. It's human nature almost. And so I'm just curious. Curling the hair and the boxing gloves and drying off, it's all weird stuff that makes us humans. But I wanted to lighten the mood a bit, I guess, at the end here, since we're talking about rebuilds and trading players and the worst team in the league and the worst game I've seen in quite some time. So where are we
I don't remember the exact details, but I remember during the playoff runs, during the heydays, the cup final run and stuff. I don't remember exactly what song or songs it was, but PK Subban said he had a game day playlist, and before the playoff games, he would listen to the same songs to hype him up, and he would only switch it up if they would go out and they would play poorly and lose. Then he would do that, but he was very adamant. He's like, when we win, I'm listening to that playlist. Then the next time we have a game.
Yeah, I will say I do the same thing. I have a playlist. I list it not as much now because my commute to Bridgestone Arena is not very long. But again, when I was in Carolina, I had a pregame playlist that I played every time in the same order on the ride. And honestly, that was win or lose. I think it was just to get myself hyped up for the game.
Well, and the reason it came up is, again, they need to be, I don't know, do you guys watch Shrinking at all on Apple TV? It's Jason Segel, Harrison Ford, Jessica Williams. It's a brilliant show.
I have seen that. I've only watched the first episode, but I have dove into that.
It is a brilliant show. The writer is the guy who wrote Ted Lasso. Roy Kent, who wrote Lasso, is the guy who wrote Shrinking. It's a fantastic show, and they're all therapists, and it's just like, it's really, really good. Very well done, very smart, funny, but also like very serious at times as well. And they talk about, yes, thank you, More to Explore. Shrinking is great. Jason Segel's a therapist, and he's talking to like one of his patients who is dealing with like domestic abuse at home in her relationship. And he's like, no, you need to boop him. He needs to be booped. And it eventually ends up with like her pushing him off a cliff, which is not what he meant. But I think about this team needing to be shaken out of its like catharsis or whatever. Like it needs, so whatever the routines are, whatever the little stitches are, they need to be shaken or twisted or changed up a little bit. And maybe that's where the road trip comes in, because every time I think about this is that they need something to like that just like boops them awake. And I know that's a weird term if you haven't seen the show, but if you've seen the show, then you know what I'm talking about.
Also, shout out to Ben. Shipping Up to Boston is one of the all-time greatest hype-up songs before any kind of sporting event.
Yeah, there you go. I was bomb tracked by Rage Against the Machine before every football game in middle school and high school. It was bomb track.
Kind of like, what is that? The song they played before all the playoff games that they took away, and the fans like revolted about it.
Is it Glorious? No. Run This Town?
Yeah, Run This Town.
Run This Town. Yeah. Didn't the fans like demand it back last year?
They did, yes.
Very weird.
Because they started going with a bunch of weird songs. Like they had a Carrollton song in there, which was a fine song, but Run This Town kind of became synonymous with Predators playoff games.
Yeah. And I'm not trying to be super rude here to anyone in the building, but the playoff game ops took a big step back last year.
It did not feel like
playoffs.
It did not feel like playoffs. And there was so much build up to that with everyone, like bring back Run This Town. Yeah. And they did, but it was like a very normal.
At one point they had sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. At one point they had the big screen was just off during the warm up. It was just black. Like it was just there was just no video on there. I'm like,
I think they were hoping that maybe like the fan reaction to hearing Run This Town would like create this big special moment. And it was like, well,
no, what made it special in 17 was they would play it with highlights of like the last game or the last few games or games from the playoffs. And they would play and they'd have Pete Weber's call like piped into the sound underneath, or Willie Donick or whatever. Like, and it got everybody hyped up. Anyway, they need to be booped is what I'm saying. I know that sounds weird, but if you've seen the show, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So,
or if you own a cat, you know what he's talking about.
break the superstitions, break the patterns of behavior, get out on the road and sort of kind of refocus. It just all feels like that's what they need. So Brad says, do they still have that awful DJ? I don't know. You talking about Crazy Kyle? I'm talking about Crazy Kyle. I don't think he's a DJ. Maybe I'm wrong about that.
Much like we said, the Dallas playoff loss broke the Predators. It also broke the Predators game ops, because after that, everything went downhill.
Yes,
the music also cut out entirely for a good 10-second period during the warm-ups for the LA game.
Oh, so, this past Monday?
Mm-hmm. Just completely shut off. It was
like are they skating during warm-ups, you're saying?
Mm-hmm. And you could hear everything. You could hear the skates, it's
good thing they're spending $700 million on the building.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, I'm working on some stuff for you guys on that one. So it will be very interesting to see what happens with that building long term.
Can you find out if we finally get a damn press box?
Probably not.
We've been waiting for decades for that. Sean Henry specifically told me, granted, this was the year before the COVID pandemic. But 2019, he told me they had plans, and he didn't show me diagrams, but he was showing me we have plans for an actual press box, and still waiting, Sean.
Yeah. All right. Anyway, enough about game ops and superstitions and patterns of behavior. Just get out on the road. Here's the thing: where are we going to be this week when we get together next week? Are we talking about a couple wins here? Because I know we don't normally look ahead to games. We almost always react backwards. But I'm just curious: are we having the same exact conversation next week?
I mean, Washington, Florida, Utah, Colorado, Edmonton. There's a lot of tough games in the next coming schedule. I don't see Florida being a win. Utah may be a toss-up. I don't see Washington being a win. So I think there's a good chance we're probably in the same spot we are next week. Only I feel like the Predators will be in a lot more of these games. I don't think we'll see the Kings loss. I don't think there's going to be 3-0 blowout like that, but I do think we're going to be in the same spot.
I agree.
There we go. On that note, Sinkers Beverages, Shotgun Willie's Barbecue, Lower Broad Hockey, at Emma_Lingan. You can also catch her, of course, on the It's All Your Fault podcast with Jeremy K. Gover at MG Sports _ as well. You can follow Michael there. You can get to me at Braden Gall. Everybody take a deep breath. It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. Thank you guys all for listening and watching. Share the show, rate, review, subscribe, notifications, thumbs up, all that good stuff. We do appreciate you guys. Otherwise, have a great week, and we will talk to you guys next time.